Hey everyone, my name is Samir Balu. I'm the Real Ideas Coordinator at the Toronto Real Asian International Film Festival. I'm an Indian Canadian man with medium length black hair wearing a navy blue sweater. I'm sitting in an office chair in my apartment's living room. Welcome to Function of Festival in Crisis 2, a second edition from a panel happening last year. This is the fourth panel in our Real Ideas conference themed Here in the Future Past. I'd like by acknowledging that Real Asians offices and main activities are located on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat nations. This territory is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a treaty of collective responsibility for the protection and sharing of land and resources. As we continue with a digitally hosted festival that will screen Canada-wide, we encourage audiences to learn the specific histories and stories of the lands they are settled on, the lands of Treaty 11, many treaty agreements, and traditional unceded territories that continue to demand justice and to support the ongoing work of Indigenous leaders and communities. While acknowledging the festival's 25-year history of growth and challenge, we renew and refresh our commitments to more abundance and complexity in Asian and Asian diasporic film and media arts. Regardless of our pathways of arrival, we all currently benefit from the Canadian government's broken treaties and imposed violence, and reckon openly with our responsibility to this land and its caretakers. We name the ways we are complicit in structures of white supremacy and also recognize that we're still in a time of great upheaval and need. We honor the longstanding work of organizers, creatives, and communities that continue to give us hope, language, and possibility, and work toward critical and reflexive allyship with Indigenous peoples exercising their sovereignty and working toward justice and freedom. For today's panel, we would like to thank the Ontario Cultural Attractions Fund, Ontario Creates, and the Province of Ontario for their support. Just a reminder that if you're watching live from our watch portal and want to ask us a question, to send it through the chat or the Ask a Question box. If you're viewing from a phone, the chat will be at the bottom of the screen. Thank you to Carmelle and Rogue, the amazing ASL interpreters in today's session, and thank you to Tony and our amazing live captioner. Lastly, we want to hear your feedback about our panels. Please visit realasian.com/RI survey and let us know what you would like and what you would like to see from our industry panels next year. We'll have a QR code posted up at the bottom. We'll take a 5-minute break in the middle of the session for everyone to stretch their legs and grab some water. I'll now hand over the rest of the time to the amazing Belinda, who will be introducing the rest of the panelists today.
Classic mistake, didn't unmute. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for attending today. And it's a real treat to moderate this panel with a number of very insightful leaders in the arts that can speak to the festival in crisis. I'll begin with a small introduction to myself. I'm a curator and an arts worker interested in social critique, pedagogy, and advocacy through the arts. My research-based practice explores how processes of knowledge translation and legitimization respond to transgenerational trauma. Currently, I'm the education and outreach coordinator at InterAccess, co-director at Bunker 2 Contemporary Art Container, although I am phasing out of that lovely team. and an executive board member of Trinity Square Video. I will begin by introducing our three amazing panelists through their written bios, but I'll also ask them to introduce themselves later on so you get a more personable picture of the folks that will be speaking today. So first, I'm pleased to have Sean Lee, artist and curator of Tangled Art and Disability with us today. Sean is an artist and curator exploring the notion of disability art as the last avant-garde. Orienting toward a CRIP horizon, he is interested in the transformative possibilities of CRIP community building and accessible curatorial practices that desire the ways disability can disrupt. Sean is the director of programming at Tangled and Art and Disability, and he is also a member of the Ontario Arts Council's Deaf and Disability Advisory Group and Toronto Arts Council Visual Arts/Media Arts Committee. Thank you, Sean, for joining us. I look forward to speaking with you. We have Scott Miller-Berry, programmer and cultural worker, working with Rendezvous with Madness. Scott Miller-Berry is a filmmaker and cultural worker, currently managing director at Berkman Arts, an art and mental health organization in Toronto that presents Rendezvous with Madness Film Festival. Previously executive director at the Images Festival. Currently on boards of Toronto Media Arts Centre, TMAC, and Long Winter Festival. On staff of annual Film Farm Residency and program films via year-round Reassemblage Collective. Recent screenings include Vukavu, New York, Wales, Montreal, Lisbon, Bangalore, Jakarta, Oberhausen, and solo retrospective at Collectivo Toronto. Welcome, Scott. So glad to have you here with us today. Last but not least, we have Darian Razdar, organizer, researcher, and artist, working with Bricks and Glitter and REFLEX Urbanism. Darian Razdar is an organizer, researcher, and artist currently living in Toronto with roots in the Great Lakes and Caspian Sea Basin. He is driven by beauty and experiment to explore cultural tensions that incite change. Darian began community organizing at a young age in Michigan and has continued in Toronto with Bricks and Glitter and REFLEX Urbanism. As an artist, Darian writes poetry, weaves rugs, dyes textiles, prints, and puts on drag. Thank you, Darian, for joining us. So great to have you and everyone here. So although I've just read the bios, everyone knows that the written bio is different from getting to know somebody in person. So, I'd like to hear what folks are up to and, how folks are feeling on this somewhat dreary evening in Toronto. And if you're not joining us from Toronto, I hope it's blue skies and sun where you are. If anyone wants to start, or if anyone wants me to volunteer them.
I don't want to start it.
Okay.
Belinda, I don't want to do that to you. Hi, everybody. My name is Darian. As Belinda said, I'm a researcher, writer, artist, and I've had the pleasure of organizing with the Bricks and Glitter collective over the last few years since I've been in Toronto. I'm still very fresh here. It's been 3 years and 1.5 of them have been during COVID. So yeah, there's a lot of very timely and interesting reflections that I'm really excited to be bringing to this conversation today. And thank you, Belinda. Thank you, Real Asian, and to my co-panelists, Scott and Sean as well.
I can jump in. Reverse order. Hi there, I'm Scott Miller-Berry. You can call me Scott. I'm a middle-aged, male-presenting human with glasses, beard, wearing a burnt yellow cap, and a blue floral print shirt with some large plants behind me. I use he, him pronouns. I'm an able-bodied, Jewish, settler, homosexual, landed immigrant, Pisces, who lives with mental health experiences in no particular order. I don't want to repeat anything that Belinda lovingly shared. What do I want to say? I love the title of this talk, and I'm really humbled and flattered to be here. So thank you for having me. I'm an optimist, not a pessimist, but I do love talking about the problems. I think that I learn the most when I am willing to get into what I think the problems are, and also hearing what other people are struggling with or celebrating, right? All of it, to try to identify, try to envision a better future in the arts. I'm okay today. Yeah, our festival just ended last week, so it's like I'm in full recovery mode, to be really honest. But I'm really excited to be here, and I look forward to this discussion with Sean and Darian, and thanks Belinda for moderating, and thanks Jasmine for inviting me.
I am happy to also describe myself and what I do. So thanks, Belinda, for that really lovely introduction. I'm Sean Lee. Well, let's start with my visual description. I'm someone who's male presenting. I use he or they pronouns. I'm an East Asian Chinese person with kind of light skin. I'm somebody who's visibly disabled. So my back curves, my shoulders are uneven. And if we met in real life, I am pretty short. I've also got black hair that I've let grow just throughout the course of the pandemic. So it started off as a really cropped haircut. And if you can imagine, it's sort of like past my shoulders. And this is really a first for me. So if folks have hair care tips, I always appreciate them. I'm wearing like these steampunk glasses. I've been describing them. They're green with these gold rims that float on the frames. I'm wearing a black t-shirt and I'm in my living room. And yeah, just like Scott, I'm so humbled to be here to discuss these, I think, really timely and important topics. I come as a disabled artist and curator with really an investment in our larger cultural practices. And so I really do appreciate having this opportunity to join such an incredible cohort here today. Yeah, that's the end of my thought. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. And I've realized that I missed my visual description, albeit plain. I'm an East Asian presenting Chinese person. I'm a woman. I have disheveled bangs and long hair. I also have earphones that are way too big for my ears, jutting out of them. I have a very plain white background that may become darker and darker as the night comes. And so if I mute myself and I say something to my right or my left, that's me instructing Google Home to turn the lights on. Darian, would you be so inclined to describe your visual description?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for the invitation to do so, Belinda. For those wondering, I'm wearing a red turtleneck sweater. I am a Iranian person, queer person with short curly hair and dark tortoiseshell glasses that you can't really tell are tortoiseshell. but are glasses for sure. And my background, you can see a project I'm working on, and a door that is slightly ajar. You might even see a cat pop in and out, or even hear a meow. So that's my visual description.
Meows and cat cameos are very, very welcome in every online meeting and panel that I'm involved in. So can we have a moment for the cat? Moving on to some of the content for today, I was wondering, past the self-descriptions and self-introductions, if you might give a short introduction or summary to the festivals that you've been involved with and are currently involved with, so that we might contextualize some of the things that we're working on or planning or recovering from. If anybody wants to start. I mean, Scott, you've just come hot off the heels of your festival. I'm wondering if that means you want to go first or last.
You voluntold me. I mean, I'm willing to go first, but I'd rather not. But if Sean and Darian are okay. I love festivals. I could bore you all to death with how much I love festivals. But I got hooked in the mid 1990s attending film festivals, film and arts festivals, but mostly film festivals, and by volunteering at film festivals. And what do I love about them? I love the condensed schedule, right? I love being able to see like a really concentrated amount of film or art in a short amount of time. I have ADHD, so maybe that's part of it. Like I love that ability to just like jump in and just like submerge. I love the social sides of festivals. I mean, the art is always, paramount and like the most important, but there's something to be said for the connections, the networking, the meeting artists, meeting other presenters, meeting audiences, of course. And I'm really lucky to have been able to pay my bills for a while now working at festivals. I'll save some other comments for later, but I started, I'm also from Michigan, which is interesting. And I moved to Toronto in 2001 and I started volunteering at the Images Festival and luckily scored a part-time contract job there. And then after 4 years of that, I became executive director. So a very, very, very lucky person. But I've also along the way, I co-founded the Super 8 Festival in Toronto, the 8 Fest, co-founded. I co-founded a series called Early Monthly Segments that was an unfunded DIY grassroots monthly film series that ran for over 8 years. I'm part of a collective project now called Reassemblage. That is just 2 of us, largely unfunded. My cat might make an appearance too. Here he is. So I'm just inspired by the work I see at festivals and coming out of festivals, but some of the stuff I will talk about, I hope today, if there's time, some of the challenges with festivals include burnout, include extreme turnover, inequities in remuneration, inequities with who has power, white supremacy is very rampant in the arts in general, I would argue, but I think it's definitely in festivals because festivals are part of the arts, and something that I hope will come up. I'll try to bring it up. Is just there's lots of ways to talk about accessibilities, right? Like accessing festivals, whether it's financial issues, technical issues, different abilities, but also, yeah, the kinds of works that are presented or not, and how they're contextualized, and all that important stuff. And then part of the access, this is very specific to film, so forgive me, but things like geo-blocking, premiere policies, submission fees, like some of the, what I call the insidious market-driven plagues. I'm using that word intentionally. These are some plagues that are forced onto festivals and exhibitors in terms of what's eligible to be shown, and then of course the pressure. I'm almost done. The pressure that festivals can put on themselves and/or feel from funders, sponsors, donors, boards, and how those pressures can influence programming decisions. I'll stop there, but thanks so much.
Thanks, Scott, for that very great and extensive overview of some of the issues facing festivals and the folks who are involved with them, either as staff, volunteer, or audience. A number of things stand out in what you said. Being a person who's also involved in schedules, the condensation of events being a rare opportunity to see many things and to get inspired, but at the same time also somewhat being a high pressure environment that puts strain on the ecosystem, your own ecosystem. And yeah, we'll definitely have an opportunity to speak more on that later. Anyone want to go next in response to Scott's sharing about his festival experience? Darian, I know that you don't have explicit programming experience with festivals, but you've been involved with them in other ways. Maybe you can give a different angle to that kind of experience or process.
Yeah, totally. Thank you, Belinda. So as Belinda has said in her introduction, I'm involved in organizing the Bricks and Glitter Festival, which is a community arts and politics festival, specifically by and for queer, trans, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and our friends, we like to add. So I'll refer to that acronym as QT BIPOC and friends in the future. And so yeah, Bricks and Glitter is this grassroots festival. We say grassroots because we're an ad hoc volunteer run collective, and the majority of the work we do is organizing this festival that's been running on an annual basis starting in 2018. I became involved in December 2019 and was involved in organizing the 2020 festival, which we had planned for in advance of COVID, and we had to, make adjustments, of course. And subsequently, we decided to go on a little break, take a little chrysalis year to do some capacity building and slow, intentional, collective work. And yeah, a lot of my work with Bricks and Glitter is more operational. So I've been doing a lot of the grant writing for Bricks and Glitter over the last year. And then when it came to the festival, I trained volunteers and just coordinated volunteers, making sure that they're well supported and their access needs were met. As well as providing like on-site support and sort of just like making sure everything was covered in terms of the production side of the festival. On the other hand, I have recently become involved with the selection committee for the Toronto Queer Film Festival, TQFF. So last year I sat on that selection committee and helped with about half a dozen other people program or sort of select the submissions that would work in the program. And this year I'm also sitting on the selection committee for the 2022 Toronto Queer Film Festival. And that's sort of my first foray into the programming side rather than the operations side of this sort of work. And yeah, that's all I have to say for now. I'd love to hear from Sean.
Thanks. Yeah. I didn't jump in because I'm not that involved with festival. I didn't know how to say that. But I guess what I can talk about is that Tangled, where I work now, did in its inception begin as a festival. And actually, I think some folks might be familiar with our previous name, which was Abilities Arts Festival. And it was started as a group of, I think, really well-meaning folks, largely able-bodied, who wanted to create a space for disability culture and arts. And I think at the time, Abilities began as a space in which you could see the best of disability arts. So bringing in, artists from internationally, from the US, and really trying to take the profile of art created by disabled people away from what was typically thought of at the time as very charitable and very much work that was, quote unquote, non-professional. And in a very interesting kind of trajectory, I think Tangled has begun to really try to understand how we can build more capacity to be disability led. And I think moving away from the festival model was actually one of those kind of ways that we took this on. We now have a gallery space that's dedicated to year-round programming of mad, deaf, disabled, sick, neurodiverse, chronically ill, spoony artists. And we're also working to advance accessible curatorial practices. And a lot of the work that we do today is about building community and having a place to kind of come back to disability arts consistently. And I think one of the things that we experienced as a festival was this lull for us at the time when the festival comes up and there's this energy, this kind of real power that electricity, right, that comes from a festival, but then it goes away. And folks who, there aren't that many disability arts spaces. And so for a lot of folks, it felt like you had to wait for that one festival at the time to come back. And so moving away into permanent year-round programming was, I think, a very intentional and important thing for us. But we still, with that being said, work with a lot of festivals. We just recently presented Tease Me with the Indigenous Curatorial Collective. And that was a really incredible experience where we could work with them to think through issues of access and identity and how disability and accessibility kind of relate to issues of indigeneity and decolonization of space. And so I think, our work isn't, we don't not work with festivals, but our work in itself has kind of shifted away from, I think largely because of what Scott said, some of the ways that festivals can be quite inaccessible, and like from an arts worker perspective. And I think, you know, as a fully disability-led space where all of our staff come with the experience of disability, you know, you need redundancy, you need kind of, you know, interdependence and care built into a structure, which I think can certainly exist in festivals, but is can be hard to do, I think, sometimes. So that's kind of a long-winded way of describing my involvement with festivals. And yeah, I'll open it back to yourself, Belinda.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sean and Darian, for those additions to Scott's insights about the festival life. You know, I'm seeing a lot of interesting threads here regarding the timescales of the festival. You know, the timelines and, you know, the amount of programming, but also, as you mentioned, Sean, the lull between this very intense time dispersing into quiet. And so even if you're not involved with festivals anymore, I think there's something valuable about thinking through the curatorial process of linking events and artworks together, because that in a way is also based on time and proximity and the ongoing events that are happening outside of the arts, but nonetheless inform the arts. Because one thing I often say to younger artists and curators is that, yes, there are aspects of art being its own thing, but art is always also pointing elsewhere. It's always telling you to pay attention to something else. So what does it mean to host an art festival about something else? And, you know, when you're welcoming audiences who are not necessarily immersed in the arts, but are interested in the topic that's thematically guiding your creative interest at the moment. So I do have a guiding set of questions that was provided to me by Real Asian, but I don't think I'll be sticking to them to a T, because the first question is about major shifts in your approach to festival programming. And I think, Sean, you've really touched on this meta scale of that question, which is, you know, deciding no longer to be a festival, and deciding, in fact, you know, maybe this is best served as year-round programming. But I'm wondering if Scott and Darian, if you have any changes to reflect on that may not be about just festival programming itself or like the specific festival you're involved with, but your approach in general to the structuring of programming in relation to these changes in intensity that we're kind of talking about here, not to get too abstract.
Yeah, I'm happy to pick up this question around shifts in festival programming and sort of the underlying question of what is the use of a arts festival. Yeah, so I think for one, Bricks and Glitter taking a year break from programming a festival has been incredibly beneficial experience. You know, interrupting the you know, constant march towards another festival is really important, because as I'm sure everybody, you know, on the panel knows, and many of you know, our audience members know, as soon as you're finished organizing an annual festival, as soon as it closes, you have a week, maybe 2 weeks, and then you're back at it. You know, you're back at organizing, preparing for the next year. And that's a cycle that obviously can create burnout very quickly. And so thanks to, funding from arts councils, but also thanks to the insight of a few of the more experienced, older members of our collective, who we've been able to question, ask ourselves very humbly, like, why do we need to make a festival every year? If the people organizing the festival aren't finding joy in it, is it going to be joyful for our audiences and for our communities? And because we've taken that break, we've been able to actually tap more into that joy of what it means to be in collective and what it means to organize community arts. And we've been able to ask ourselves, like, do we want to organize a festival? Like, is that what our communities need right now? We've continually come back to that question over the last year. And while we don't have quite like a definitive answer, we have sort of come to the recognition that while there is an oversaturation of festivals in our local arts ecosystem, the festivals are still an incredibly important and useful form, especially for giving platforms, for redistributing resources and funds among artists, and for exactly what Scott was saying earlier, connecting folks, providing spaces for social worlds to flourish, and specifically with Bricks and Glitter for queer and trans, BIPOC social worlds to flourish. And yeah, I think, of course, with COVID being a persisting reality in our worlds, like, festivals are going to look different. Festivals will never look the same as they used to. I think with Bricks and Glitter, we've found it really helpful to lengthen the period of our festival to 2 weeks, and spreading it over a longer period of time gives us, a lot more space to go slow and to provide more intentional access to our audiences. Yeah, that's all I really have to say about the shifts that we're going on, but I'm sure there's lots of other shifts going on elsewhere.
Thank you, Darian. There's something to be said for sure about breathing room and time for processing, not only in terms of the staff, although the staff are, of course, experiencing the brunt of the burnout, but also for audiences. If important subject matter or themes are being brought about in a festival, then certainly there's also a need for those audiences to take those themes and have time to digest them. So thank you for sharing that insight. Scott, you have so much experience over this festival spectrum. I'm wondering, you must have jumped from strategy to strategy, being involved with different groups. Are there any strategies in particular for festival running that are standing out to you currently in your practice?
Thank you. Thanks for asking. Thanks for the previous comments that are still percolating. I mean, the 29th Rendezvous is so fresh, right? We just ended last week. And we tried a hybrid festival this year because we have access to a brand new theater in our new space. We moved to a new location last year. So we were, of course, excited about using the new theater. But in the end, it was really like running multiple festivals at once because we had to attend to all of the needs of the in-person on-site, the the technical and artistic, the artist, needs and requests are paramount, but then of course all the COVID protocols and safety protocols, and I don't know. I mean, it's still fresh, but I think we kind of failed in that I think we were overprogrammed. Like, I think I lead the film committee, so I'm mostly on the film side, and we've become a very multidisciplinary festival over the years now. We're live performance and exhibitions and a lot of talks, of course, because of the subjects that we're getting into. Anyway, we did a symposium in the middle of the festival. We did a gathering about festival archives right before the festival. We did a virtual exhibition. We had a live theater performance with 6 shows. We had workshops on site and online. Yeah, we kind of, we started the year thinking we're going to do less, online live events. We got feedback in 2020 that our audience was just exhausted by trying to keep up, and that makes sense. But I don't know, we fell into the project grant trap of, let's try a symposium and let's do this, let's do that. And then the festival just became very, very big. So literally we were cross scheduling against ourselves. We had things at the same time. Yeah, it's, it still needs further, getting really dark really fast. It needs more investigation and like more, time to kind of step away and really think it through. But I think, we talk about really heavy issues at Rendezvous. We talk about traumas, and we talk about suicide, and we talk about all kinds of very heavy things. So I think we're always trying to, we're trying to be sensitive to what audiences might be there for or might need in terms of, whether it's a supportive listener, whether it's taking breaks, whether it's content warnings, right? But then when you throw everything online, which we mostly did, it's like, as you all know, it's a totally different planet, and all of those things are still there and still very important, but they just take on different meanings, and they also get into different levels of I'm trying to unlearn my assumptions around who has good internet access and who even knows how to use a tablet or use a computer, and like who even has access to one. Like there's all these things. I think that I still get very lured into all this online art opportunities, but the reality is that for a lot of people those opportunities aren't possible. They don't have internet, and if they're lucky enough to have a home, they don't have internet. So anyway, all this to say, like, I think something Sean said recently really inspired me in terms of how to make your event more accessible. Don't try to do everything all at once, right? Like, don't, like, really think about intentionality. Really think about, it's like, what is most important to the Rendezvous audience, right? Are we going to really try to just do supportive listening and whatever that looks like, to make sure the audience knows that whatever might be coming up for them through the art, that they've got someone to talk to? Or are we going to really try to support deaf, differently hearing audiences? Or is that something we're going to really prioritize and work with people who live that way already to like help us understand what those issues are? Anyway, I think it's a really long answer to your question, but I think we still have some work to do in terms of like prioritizing and intentionality, and like not trying to do everything every single year. And and I appreciate what Darian said. It's like literally you close the festival and you're already planning the next, and it's like there's like, where is the time for rest and recuperation, but also where's the time to reflect, right? I mean, and really reflect not just in the audience surveys, of course, but like really reflect internally as organizers and as curators and programmers about what just happened, what didn't work, and what can we do better. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. I just got a message that perhaps it is time for a break. But before our break, I did want to sort of synthesize some of the things that our panelists have said, because I think there's an excellent thread going on about the limitations of the festival, both out of our control, but also within our control. What it means to mindfully set the limits, and then also beyond the festival model itself, eloquently brought up by Sean. What kind of broader ecosystem does the festival exist in? Because meaning for a festival, or rather how meaningful a festival can be, is understood in this greater vocabulary around exhibitions, around one-time screenings, about longer term community building in the topics and the media that we're working with. And so, I'm really glad that there is a balance amongst the panelists for folks who are immersed in festival planning at the moment, and folks who have intentionally decided to take a moratorium on festivals, or recognize that it's not for me or it's not for you. And so with that said, let's take a little 5-minute break and return at 5:24. So we will return soon. I wish folks a very good break. Grab some tea, some snacks, perhaps. Hello, everyone. We're back from break. I've got some grape blueberry juice with me to tide me over till the end. As we wait, oh, there's Darian. Hello, hello. As I was on break, I was thinking about that relationship between the curatorial practice of exhibition making versus festival programming. And it occurred to me, this summer I went to UTech, Montreal, which is always extremely, extremely stacked and very high production. And I was thinking about how, as a festival attendee, you yourself have to curate your festival experience, because unless you are a Virgo passing person like me, you would not try to attend everything. And so I think that's quite interesting, because there's this swath of programming and you get to take your pick. But also that's present in exhibitions. You don't necessarily need to have this high speed, intense experience to pick what you see. And so I think that, that's an interesting way to think about those two different styles of programming. We've got a question coming in. If folks are inclined to address this, we've got a question about highlighting an event or mentorship program that our panelists have been a part of before. This question asker is curious to hear about the training, mentorship, and guidance offered to artists. Thank you for this question. I think that, yeah, there's definitely a model of professional development and learning specific to the festival. So if anyone wants to take that question on.
I can talk about some of the mentorship kind of opportunities that exist and that I've also participated in. I specifically, what was really valuable for my time at Tangled was a curatorial residency that I participated in that has continued annually since. And I think a big part of why this was so important to me was that, like, a lot of times residencies are about kind of one finished product, or kind of being able to take time to do independent research. And the curatorial residency as it exists today is almost its own kind of position as a curator. And it's an opportunity to kind of learn about curatorial practices. As someone who kind of, you know, has lived experience of disability, and you know, very much kind of has the kind of, I guess, the visible experience of disability, but not necessarily the cultural experience of it. This opportunity was really important because it taught me about the ways that disability can be constructed and how I can participate in disability culturally. And I think that's been kind of the goal for this, and a lot of the work that we do at Tangled. You know, in addition to the residency, every time we hold an exhibition, we do kind of like this access design workshop that feels too formal. Like, I think it's kind of a one-on-one where you work with the artist to think through accessibility and kind of meaningful ways it can be incorporated. And a lot of folks, including myself, first come into disability culture thinking, you know, that access is all about this compliance-based checklist. It's always about, you know, being able to have the official way to generate access. And that requires, I think, a lot of unlearning on a lot of our ends, like to understand access as something cultural and something communal, and as a like kind of a act of hospitality, I think helps us shift from understanding it from that compliance-based space into something generative and something that can be creative and, you know, incorporate things like creative access into the field of what you're presenting. And, you know, access can go beyond that, right? A lot of what we're doing these days is about that crypt sense of process over product, and really trying to model how you can resist ableist assumptions of productivity in your work. And I think vis-a-vis allowing, you know, audience members to really understand what a professional, quote unquote, art space can and should be. In our most recent exhibition, Undeliverable, which was curated by Carmen Papalia and included artists Jess Sash, Chandra Melting Tallow, Jessica Karuhanga, Aslan Thomas, and Vanessa Dion Fletcher. You know, all of the artists who participated really took on almost a relaxed exhibition making kind of sense in how the works were created, presented, when they were included. And I think that was in the spirit of Undeliverable. It was really about, you know, holding on to this idea that disabled folks are, you know, re-engaging with the museum on their own terms. And, you know, it came across, it came in very embodied ways and in very physical ways. You know, for instance, none of our exhibition statements arrived on time, which we had been saying is fine. That's, you know, this is our first show since COVID. We're all kind of trying to find our own bearings again. And so what we did was, anywhere that something wasn't ready or something wasn't there yet, we hand painted the word undeliverable there. And so you, like, when you first came into the gallery or you took a tour with us, you just see the word undeliverable 6 times. And because we had actually reframed our gallery space to being by appointment only or through digital tours, you could actually talk through in a perhaps kind of didactic way, like what the process of creating this show was. And I think helping us to understand that, this slowness, that this process over product is very much part of the curatorial process, and an intentional way of reframing what our art sector could, should, might one day be, I think was very important to us and to Carmen and to all the artists. And I think there was something really beautiful about just, the resistance in that word undeliverable, which was proposed to us by one of the artists, Jess Sash. And so, I think, this moment of mentorship is really important, because society still very much views disability as this failing, as this personal failing. And so when we come to understand disability culturally, it requires a lot of that mentorship. It requires being able to build a community on different terms. So the residencies have been incredibly important, but so have those kind of intangible moments, right? Working with artists, working with folks to just try to reframe what access can be and should be was very important, I think.
Thanks for that answer, Sean. There are some, again, like time or temporal relationships between the residency and the festival that are quite important to note. That piece of time that you can decide to connect to a longer timeline or not. Definitely a more mentorship focused approach to that short timepiece. Some of the things that rang very true for me in what you said, Sean, was this, I guess, phenomenon on how, when seeking mentorship and seeking to learn and seeking to find your path of professional development, whether it's in the arts or not, it really strikes me how the conceptual values of a place can really determine what you learn and what you take away. Like a festival that's not focused on being forgiving and flexible. It will teach you very different things from a festival or an organization that is committed to those things and is committed to seeing that as a path to creative development rather than a failure, as you put it, Sean. So yeah, I think that's such a beautiful and like non-standard answer, as someone who has like struggled in that festival format. So thank you for that. But I don't want to like reduce it to the beautiful, because it's also not just beautiful. It's, it is a process. It's got its ugly parts, and I do want to acknowledge that as well. It's not something to be romanticized, although it has valuable moments to offer. So of course, this title of the panel is The Festival in Crisis. And we all know that kind of looming thing that we associate with crisis or have associated with crisis in the past few years. And some of the questions that were outlined in the genesis of this panel are really about what it means to program something when all else is going on. And how do we remain responsive to all of that when we're pre-programming these things, and then all of a sudden something turns on its head, and then it flips the script, so to speak. So how does one negotiate adjusting programming to respond to surrounding events. How does that compare to wanting to commit to seeing the structure of existing programming through?
I could jump in and speak to that. I think one of the strong suits of Bricks and Glitter is its ad hoc nature. Of course, like as a collective who gets project funding from different granting bodies, there are some standards that we meet, like most festivals do. But like from my personal experience organizing the 2020 Bricks and Glitter Festival, we moved our program from, I believe, July or August into the end of September and early October. And we were flexible because one, our funding, had a longer timeline that we could use the funding until. But I think what was more crucial in being able to make that decision very easily was our commitment to the artists and commitment to the people at the end of the day, whether it's the artists, the organizers, the audiences, a commitment to the people over the festival itself, right? Relationality is always, I think, the most important organizing tool that we have. And it allows you to make adjustments, it allows you to understand what needs are going on without having to go through a very formal needs assessment. And yeah, I think that's something I've seen. And then really quickly about the last question from the audience member, I can speak to also my experience joining Bricks and Glitter's organizing team without any experience a part of a festival or doing, arts programming necessarily. I found that my community organizing experience was something that was valued. And those gifts were something that I was able to employ, and there was space to do so in Bricks and Glitter. So if anybody's interested in, joining a festival, organizing team, or doing community arts programming, I would really just lean into your gifts and your talents. And there's always more people needed in these spaces so that we could share the work and avoid burnout. So I would really encourage you to connect with anybody you know and just jump into it.
Thanks, Darian. That's such a great dovetailing of the two questions. Yeah, like Scott, you've just come off of the festival, and so I do want to give you time to process it. But one question that's percolating in my mind for you is, when talking about trauma and sensitive topics, those matters are always active, always, on fire, always, highly sensitive. And it doesn't need a specific event to be serious because it's serious at all times. And so I'm wondering if you've had any particular strategies for taking care with the folks that you're working with and the folks that you'll encounter in that programming process. Or perhaps if there's no answer currently, what are some of the challenges you're facing?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah, whenever I do talks, or even meet people that have never heard of Rendezvous with Madness, I sooner or later I say it's not all depressing. And of course I'm saying it with love and humor, but but it's hard, right? It's hard, like it. I think, you know, the creators of this beautiful festival like really put something into play that's like, it's not easy, right? It's like to get people to want to make time and or pay money and or schedule them, you know, themselves wherever they are might be, you know, to like, yeah, reflect on trauma or loss or you know, abuse, etc., like all kinds of things, right? And how art can be, you know, obviously, like we're championing art that's a vehicle to talk about these things, but it's not easy. I did make a comment early in our planning this year. I was like, let's just the whole theme this year should be death. And I actually was kind of serious. I was like, there's because like we're all living, have been living in and maybe coming out of something that's very intense, and we'll be living with it for a while, right? And I'm not making light. I'm not making light of it. It's like very, very upsetting, and so much loss. But I thought, okay, I personally want our festival to continue to champion really hard discussions and to really like to, you know, we don't shy away, but then sometimes we probably do, because sometimes things are just too much. So, you know, we did present a shorts program about death and grief and mourning, and there was a more interactive discussion. So it was there, but this kind of connects to the question about mentorship, I hope, but you know, something we've gotten better at, I'd humbly say, the last few years, pre-corona days, is really working with and or hopefully mentoring artists, even if artists who submit or pre-submission, but also artists who've been selected, right? We're trying to break down the you know, and especially in the festival world, and it's even worse in the film festival world, there's just so many gatekeepers and so much secrecy and there's so little transparency, right, on who's making decisions, how are submissions being seen, if at all, you know, where's the submission money going, and of course, who is selected and why. So we've really tried to break that down, but that's quite separate from the care you're asking of. I mean, although that's care, I would argue that's care on a certain level. Sorry, I'm speaking too fast. I'm really sorry. Getting passionate. We try to work with everyone that wants to work with us in a way that really respects where they're at and also helps them along the way, right? Whether it's how to get their submission in, how to present the work as best as possible, how they want us to talk about them or their project, how, you know, whether it's the image description or whether it's their biography or whether it's, of course, how it's presented or how it's screened or how it's contextualized. Sometimes that means sending the catalog text to them in advance, right? Sometimes it means having a lot of meetings, you know, in advance to talk through questions or concerns or, you know, like all of these things, because I think historically, including Rendezvous, it was like, send us what you want to show, either we'll say yes or no, and then it's up to us to figure it out. It's like, well, that's actually really arrogant and elitist, right? It's like, festivals are, in my humble opinion, it's like we're like the shepherd, like we're like the cipher, right? It's like we're hopefully working with artists to bring their work to the public, to engage, right? To engage. But why is the festival any more important than the art, right? And I think that's what happens, what I've seen in festival, especially in film festival culture, is that the festival's ego and needs take over, right? And then they put all kinds of rules and parameters and restrictions on the artists. But our festival would not exist without the artists. But I would argue that's true for every festival, right? You can't have a festival without artists. So why are the artists often like the lowest priority, paid terribly, you know, if they're paid at all? You know, I could go on and on. So back to your question. Yeah, I think we're still learning, right? But we're really we're trying to take care of the artists along the way. Again, even if they're not selected, even before they submit, even if they want feedback about their thing that didn't get in. And then of course, taking care of the audiences, whether they're at home or they're on site, or they can't connect to the stream, whatever it is, or they're upset because the film, was upsetting for them, like helping them find their supports. And yeah, I feel like we're living an interesting time where it's like I do think in general there's an attentiveness to care, right, in terms of presenting art, content warnings, sensitivities. Those things are very good, but we're also living in this time where it's like we're all triggered all the time, and it's like, well, that's in my humble opinion also kind of a problem. It's like we can't always be triggered all the time and also be trying to help each other. And I know that I'm taking into a different direction, and I'm sorry, but that's what comes up for me when thinking about care. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Scott, for weaving your insights and interest into the question. There's something that Darian said that really resonates with me after your answer, Scott, and that's that there's this notion of commitment to the people, and you're adding to it, the commitment of all the people who are involved with a given endeavor, and then also their products of attention and care, which, with the artist is their work, which has kind of a feedback loop with the people who experience the festival as well. It's, these folks' experiences and processes and efforts condensed into their work, and it makes a set of relations, as you said, Darian, that we have the responsibility of stewarding as organizers. And so, you've brought up a very interesting point, Scott, which is, well, it's a point that's kind of, come up over the various answers and questions of being able to forgive, or alternatively let go, or alternatively bend some of the expectations, to unlearn, brought up, in different ways by Sean and Darian, and the endeavors that we're involved in. And so I kind of want to, pick up on that as something to reflect on. What does it mean to have structures in place as helpful assistance, and then, go between those structures or decide to not go with those structures? Because in my own experience, I totally agree. It's been very helpful to have content warnings and have a baseline model for taking care of folks and being considerate of all aspects of the endeavor. But then also, if you don't know your audience, the folks that you're working with, the things that you're working with, and you don't stay considerate of them, and you're not willing to continue that relationship by unlearning and learning, then, what are those structures for? And so thank you for, bringing those considerations to the fore. We are reaching the end of the conversation and sort of moving into the question period time. But, there is a question remaining of what it means to produce or platform art in times of difficulty. And, what are those kinds of, it's a very loaded term, but radical possibilities. At the same time, what are the limitations of art in relationship to crisis? I mean, it's a very difficult question to be the first person to answer. So I'm wondering if anyone wants to go in for that.
I would be happy to kind of take a stab at it, but I'm thinking specifically to well, during the pandemic, during the lockdown, you know, that we were all brainstorming different ways to recreate connection in the context that we were working in. And we were always joking that we were in kind of like crypt times in that moment. Crypt time kind of referencing this different way of time and temporal realities that disabled folks have had, kind of now being almost more prevalent, more in the space that we're in. And this there was a disability academic named Robert McRuer who also simultaneously talked about crypt times, which was really funny. But like he talked about how crypt times was, I think, this what he called multivalent phrase, where it like points towards the bleak, hard, precarious times and a lot of the, you know, the suffering that exists, but it also points towards the vibrancy of the community and the hacktivist ways that disabled folks have always, you know, contended with these realities, not just during the pandemic. And so, you know, the crypt times that we were in, I think, gave us a lot of opportunities to be responsive and to try to change our practices. And I just want to talk about one quick way, which was, you know, when we thought about how we returned to the gallery, we went very DIY with a digital tour, which was just like an iPad on a tripod on wheels. And we wanted to kind of create a sensation of being in a community, being able to talk to others. And so we did that as an offering, an alternative to coming physically into the gallery. And while it's by no means a perfect way of, you know, engaging in access, you know, we were so surprised at all the folks who took us up on it and really even recommended that over the in-person, which, you know, I think more and more at first we were unsure of what kind of offering we'd have. But, you know, it was a really powerful way of, you know, reframing kind of what the gallery experience could be. And so that's kind of my messy way of thinking about the times we're in and the multivalent ways that crypt times have kind of created a lot of really innovative ways of accessing the arts in this moment.
Thank you for that, Sean. I'm thinking like our panelists are motivated to jump in, so feel free.
I'll jump in. Yeah, I love this question. It's like that's its own panel right there. You know, trying to present a mental health and addictions, you know, related festival, it's like it comes with it's like there's a lot of responsibility and a lot of privilege, right? And in terms of like this is like that is our zone year over year over year. But one little thing that I'm really proud of when we moved online last year was, you know, we have a membership of artists that's 500 plus, who not everyone uses email even or has a computer, and I referenced that earlier. So we found some money to buy some tablets. And so again, this year, for people that, you know, want to watch from wherever they are but don't have access to technology, these are Wi-Fi enabled tablets that we just loan out for free, and we do tutorials, and there's all kinds of, you know, and we take the time to help people, you know, figure them out, because I can barely use a tablet myself. But that's just me. So that's, you know, it's like, it's not, I don't know if that's radical, but it's like it's like thinking about the gaps, right? And it's like even just thinking about how like try not to, I and the festival try not to make assumptions about who is our audience, why do people come or not. Although we want to know everything, want to know why they're coming and why they're not coming, right? We really we value all of that feedback, but try not to make assumptions about how people are accessing the work and why. I had so many other things to say about this question. I mean, I think that as a result of COVID-19, we all had to question almost everything, right? It's like as an arts organization, we had to question, like, why are we doing what we're doing? Who is it for? You know, what is it all about? It became a bit of an identity crisis. You know, I think for us as humans, as cultural workers, but also as us collectively in our respective organizations and in our sectors, right? But for me, like, how, again, I'm not making light of the awful downsides of the pandemic, but it's like, this was an opportunity. Like, this is exciting. It's like the question, why we're even doing this? Like, when does that happen? Like, when do we actually step back and say, why the hell are we doing this? Or doing it this way and not that way? Or for, you know, like, so I've kind of tried to treat it, and you know, it's not easy, of course, but it's like I've tried to treat it as an opportunity to really interrogate, like, what are we doing it? Why are we doing it this way? And I already shared a bit that I think, you know, we stumbled this year in certain ways. But I think, unfortunately, to bring it back to festivals, I think festivals are very lured by the thrill of getting bigger, by the potential funding and sponsorship and glitz and glamour or whatever of growing. But sometimes festivals lose sight of what it's like their actual spirit, or their like why they're doing, what is it, why is getting bigger like that's such a capitalist colonial, like these are really entrenched systems that of course we're all unlearning. But I think one of the privileges at Rendezvous is that we have almost no no sponsorship. We have almost no, like, we're not indebted. We can do almost whatever we can do whatever we want, basically. But that's a privilege. That is its own privilege, right? We're not held back. We're not beholden to anyone, any funder, all that stuff. So I've been lucky to work at those kinds of festivals here, and that is a total privilege. But how do we keep pushing ourselves as workers and in a system that does create burnout? Like, where's the radicality? Like, how do we, like, applying it to programming is one thing, but applying it to HR practices, applying it to governance, you know, like when I see a festival like Jayu, Human Rights Festival, offering unlimited sick days, unlimited vacation days, and now a 4-day work. So those were before COVID, now a 4-day work week. Those are decisions that are done going forward. Like, to me, that's radical. It's like, because that's saying the health of the staff is intrinsic to the health of the festival. So that's one inspiring thing I wanted to share. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. Darian?
Yeah, thanks for this question. To quickly jump in and sort of respond, I think exactly what Sean and Scott were saying, like, are really generative reflections, and especially around questioning growth, especially around questioning what methods we use to make access for our audiences really important. The way I think about the function of festival in crisis, first I think about, you know, the fact that before COVID-19 and through COVID-19 and after COVID-19, we're always going to be in continual crisis. Like, that's not going away. I think we've been operating, a lot of folks who are coming out of, you know, intersectional grassroots spaces have been operating with that in mind already. I also think about, like, the use value of things, right? Like, so what is the actual use of an arts festival, rather than, you know, the exchange value that it might create. So I'm thinking about all the ways that, you know, artists get paid and able to, you know, create a sustainable livelihood through presenting through arts festivals, and the connections they're able to make there that also help them support their lifestyle as an artist. I'm also thinking about like Scott was saying, the lives that are supported through like the staff or the organizers of these festivals, and just like also the affective realm that is also very material in the space to critique, but also to escape and to dream through being a part of a festival. I think those are all like the radical seeds of this form, or within the use of it. But I think it's very easy, again, for it to go into this exchange, almost like artists are selling their products to the festival, which programs and sells it to an audience. And I think that's a big sign that that festival needs to be really rethought. I think one of the things that you know, Bricks and Glitter has learned over, and I've learned over the last year of taking this break, is that the festival is not the only form. I think Tangled is a really good example of this. And that, yeah, I think there are other possibilities. And if we start with, you know, what artists need and what sort of work they're producing, we can think of other ways to exhibit their work. I think it's very convenient. The festival form is very convenient within like capitalist industries. And I think it's, yeah, it's just really paramount that we have these conversations and the space and the time to reflect. So that's it.
Thank you, everyone, for your thoughtful contributions to this question. It's a big question. I think I should have allotted more time. Certainly, we are only scratching the surface and entering the thicker substance now. But I'm really just thinking about what you said earlier, Darian, about the justification. You know, what justifies the way we go about festivals? And like you said, Scott and Sean, when is it time to change those justifications? And I think that's a good question to leave off, you know, because every festival is different in the way that it operates. But underneath those operations and underneath what you're proposing to the grantors is a community or a personal justification that matters. And sometimes it's easy to get lost in it and forget what those justifications are. Thank you so much, everyone. It's been a pleasure to speak to you and, you know, learn from your insights. I'll now pass it over to Samir, who will be conducting the wrap up to this conversation.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Belinda, for directing this wonderful conversation. We really hope to continue this conversation on our film forum on Discord. If you aren't on our Discord yet, we would love for you to join the conversation. We dropped the link into the chat and we'll have the QR code posted up in a moment. Please scan the QR code for our survey and let us know your thoughts as well. Again, thank you, Belinda, Sean, Scott, and Darian for today's conversation and all your wonderful insights and stories. Thank you to Carmelle and Rogue, our amazing ASL interpreters. Thank you to our awesome live captioner, Tony. And for our backend support, thank you, Chris, Mimi, and Joe. Just a reminder that Real Asian is still going on until November 19th. You can learn more about our programming and how to buy a ticket at realasian.com/festival. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you take care and hope to see you join our next panel tomorrow. Bye, everyone.